Okay, so we're ready to start again. This will be our sixth session. If everybody would please mute themselves, because we're recording at this point. Go ahead and mute. Welcome everybody to session number 6. And I'm going to turn it over to Ward quickly to get it started. We're getting into the real meaty stuff right now. So he's going to prepare us for that. If you would please remember to stay muted. We're gonna be lenient about questions, but I need you to raise your hands. And the way we do that electronically is with the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen under our reactions. I'm also going to paste the shortcuts for that. I just pasted them now into the chat window, so everyone should be able to do that. We have some designated readers today, and they're looking forward to sharing this with you, and I will turn it over to Ward. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Let me try the share screen. Can you see it? Is it there?
It's looking good. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's see where we got to. I think we might have gotten to about here.
Yeah.
So,
all we read was Ramju's pencil.
Yeah, that introduction. So just as a reminder, we're on the talk, the third talk, 5th, 6th December 1927. I don't know what that means. That's what it said in the manuscript. And Baba has been giving a lot of what Baba has given so far. It's very metaphysical, very substantive. A lot of it you would get from God Speaks. Although now he's going to start to get into other topics. And Cassandra and I were thinking before this began, if you really, this could be material where you might really have questions as we're going along. We would prefer in the reading, if you have questions, raising hands, as Cassandra said, things that are very specific exactly to what we're reading, if you really don't understand what we're reading. Bigger questions than that, please keep them in mind and hold them until the end, and then we can come back and talk about those bigger things. But here, there might be some things that really need to be clarified that are a bit confusing. Also, Melissa was pointing out that, at an end of a paragraph, I'll put it this way, pace yourself. Don't, if you're a reader, remember that this is very conceptually dense. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's stylistically difficult. It's not. But in terms of its content, it's very dense. Okay, do we want to have someone start reading? This is going to be, this will be the figure that we're bouncing off of.
You got everything nice and big there. That's good.
Yeah.
So let's have Sam read first.
May I make a very quick suggestion, Ward? The reader, it is important when they're reading, they read it with an intention, with the intention of really understanding the words and grasp the concept. And if they do it with that intention, we get it in the same way, just the way you read it. When you read it, I get it for some reason. But anyway, I thought this a clue. Thank you.
I'm thinking with this, why don't we take a look at the figure first and then go back to it, because he's going to start talking about the figure immediately. Now, here is the figure. This is developing on what we've already had. Here, I'm going to expand it so you can see the whole thing a little bit. So this is on top A. Okay, the figure is waves, bubbles, and foam. A is God or Darya, and Darya means ocean. That word is going to come up a lot here. And it's the unconscious God. He's talking about the creation process. B is the creator point, and earlier he had explained that's creator, preserver, destroyer. It's the man blowing a balloon whose focus is all on the balloon and not on himself, the balloon being creation. C is waves and bubbles, and D is the foam. And down here you have a wave and a wave bubble being a blow up. This was done by Nadia. So this you won't get in God Speaks. You'll get drop bubbles, which is what this here on the left is. These are drop bubbles. You see at the center is Atma. The bubble is around the outside. There's Akash or space in it, as we'll learn. These are drop bubbles and these are wave bubbles. And maybe, Sam, if you're game for it, do you want to start by reading the key to the figure and then we can go back to the start of the lecture?
Sure. Key to figure 6. The second in a series of 3 connected diagrams, the upward facing bowl A here represents God, the infinite ocean, as it does in figure 5. Counterbalancing.
That refers to this. You see the A there. Sorry, I'm just.
No,
yeah.
it's okay.
Okay.
Counterbalancing this, the downward facing bowl, presumably, as in figure 7, represents the emptiness and hollowness that is the created universe. Out of the Om point, B, project countless waves and bubbles, C. The foam, D, though named several times in creation and its causes, is never explained and remains something of a mystery. Okay, continue.
Mm-hmm.
Resuming with explanations, lecture of 5, 6, 12, 20, 19, 27, page 2, proceeding.
I'm sorry, let me just jump in just to remind everybody that in the preceding 3 or 4 pages, the manuscript, the page was missing in all of our manuscripts, but there was a write-up by Ramju that parallels it. So all of that was taken from Ramju, but now we're back to the primary manuscript. Sorry.
Yes. So Shri explained, now when this ocean comes into motion, from the outset, as depicted in figure 6 on the facing page, it precipitates in 3 things: waves, foam, and bubbles. And then the footnote in Ramju's explanations in pencil, page 5, we are told further that the waves are equivalent to light globes and that bubbles equals shadows and foam. Leaving aside the matter of foam for the present, each of the waves is associated with its own big bubble, which we call the wave bubble. And each such wave bubble contains innumerable small drop bubbles. Every wave bubble is equal to an entire world. Hence, the total count of worlds is innumerable. Then again, each wave has, in addition to its own associated wave bubble, innumerable drops, big and small. Each big drop contains its countless drop bubbles, and each small drop, too, has drop bubbles. These are equivalent to the so many myriad forms in creation. In short, we find 2 kinds of bubbles, wave bubbles and drop bubbles, each in unlimited profusion. Countless worlds corresponding to the countless wave bubbles host the countless forms of the innumerable drop bubbles. As atom, stone, metal, vegetable, animal, human, and so forth. Setting aside the question of drop bubbles for the moment, let us turn to the wave bubbles. Now, a bubble is emptiness or hollowness. Our world, and indeed all the worlds, are mere bubbles. Emptiness, hollowness. Indeed, this characterization as emptiness and hollowness and nothingness applies not just to these worlds, but to everything below the creator point in figure 7.
You want
Each
to
wave-
pause there? You want
Yes,
to pause
sure.
there, Sam?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to check in with people. Are you getting the notion of waves and bubbles and all that stuff? We're not going to be able to explain it deeply as Ward said, but at least are you able to follow along? If you have a question.
I think if
Please don't unmute yourself. Please raise a hand if you have a question. We're not taking comments right now, but if you would just raise your hand if you have a question about the material we just read. Okay, go ahead, Christina. You have a question?
Yes.
We can't hear you.
Can't unmute.
You are unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah. So you're saying no comments?
Not at this point. We're going to save them for later.
If you could, comments are important. If you could hold them until the end, but this is just points of clarification or explication of what we're actually reading
Okay.
at this stage, so that we can actually get through the book.
I do have comments, but I'll hold them.
Okay. Yeah.
Elizabeth, did you have a question?
I just wanted to request to see the chart again, which you put up. And I just wanted to, while we were reading it, it would have been helpful to be able to see it. I don't know if that's possible with the split screen, so we could follow along. So I'm trying to draw them, but it takes a few minutes.
Yeah, well, we can go over it again, but we can't show them both at the same time because the readers
Yeah.
need to see the screen. So you want to go over the
Yeah.
chart again? Yeah.
Yeah, so he
well, I
refers
do.
to, he referred at the end to figure 7, and emptiness and hollowness is everything below the point. We haven't gotten to this figure yet, but this you can see right in here, right? Emptiness, hollowness, nothingness. Pokol, that's going to be a really big word.
Yeah, I was actually referring to chart 6.
Yeah,
I just needed more time to look at it. That's all. I'm just saying,
yeah.
take it in. It takes a little bit of time. Thank
Yeah,
you.
unfortunately, we don't have the book to show you yet, but
Yeah.
Lindsay, did you have a question about what we read so far?
Yeah, I have 2 questions and they're quick, I hope. I don't know, it went by fast. Did I get it that each drop bubble has multiple bubbles within it?
He hasn't said that, but he said that wave bubbles have multiple drop bubbles within it.
Yeah, I got that. I just looked at the pictures and I thought I saw lots of bubbles in the drop bubbles.
Yeah.
No, okay. And the other is, what is a world?
You know, we're going to find out that a world is something like our Earth. That's
Okay,
an example. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Mahu.
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to suggest, I hope I don't come across fussy, but I like to suggest that Sam reads it a little bit slower. These are, as Ward said, dense materials. So, and it's early in the morning, California. I'm having a hard time following. Having said that, Ward, can you please, or any other reader after him, Ward, can you please say the difference between wave bubbles and drop bubbles?
Very briefly, because this topic is going to get developed a lot here, but a wave bubble is like a planet would be an example of that. Earth would be a wave bubble, and a drop bubble would be like you or a cat or a stone, an individual jivatma. A jivatma would be that is a jivatma with a physical form. We're going to find out that the bubble relates to the gross sphere. We haven't had that yet, but it's going to come up. But the whole Earth has its own bubble. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheryl?
I was just wondering if Sam could reread, if we could reread what was just read, please.
The whole thing?
No, the last couple of paragraphs. I don't know how many we've read. I'm looking at it, but at this point, I don't remember. The last paragraph or a couple of paragraphs.
How about the last two paragraphs? How would that be?
Thank
Might
you.
be good. Yeah.
Would that
Then
help?
again,
Okay.
each wave has from there.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sam.
Then again, each wave has, in addition to its own associated wave bubble, innumerable drops, big and small. Each big drop contains its countless drop bubbles, and each small drop too has drop bubbles. These are equivalent to the so many myriad forms in creation. In short, we find two kinds of bubbles, wave bubbles and drop bubbles, each in unlimited profusion. Countless worlds corresponding to the countless wave bubbles host the countless forms of the innumerable drop bubbles as atom, stone, metal, vegetable, animal, human, and so forth. Setting aside the question of drop bubbles for the moment, let us turn to the wave bubbles. Now, a bubble is emptiness or hollowness. Our world, and indeed all the worlds, are mere bubbles. Emptiness, hollowness. Indeed, this characterization as emptiness and hollowness and nothingness applies not just to these worlds, but to everything below the creator point in figure 7.
This might be a good moment to look at figure 7. We glanced at it before. You see, it's the same basic figure we've had. We were just following the lead of our source diagrams down here. These are all from Ramchu's thing. But now everything beneath the Om point is characterized as emptiness, hollow nothingness. And that word pokol, that's a word worth getting to know. The L with the dot under it is la. Some retroflex L. And it's going to turn out that the gross sphere is emptiness. And here's another key to the diagram. Sam, do you feel in a mood to read that?
Sure. This is the key to figure 7. The last in the series of diagrams that began with figure 5. Figure 7 carries over most of the diagrammatic elements from figure 6. But what is distinctive about it is that it names the large dome in the lower part of the diagram, applying to it the designation of emptiness, hollowness, and nothingness. Emptiness, or pokal, is about to emerge as a major theme in creation and its causes. It becomes a central feature in the rather enigmatic figure 9 in Baba's lecture the next day.
So Pokal is making its entry into our discussion big time.
Maybe let's have Diana read for a little bit. And just a reminder, people, we are recording this so that you can watch it again and as many times as you want. So
I'm a little
Diana?
lost. I'm
each
Where do I
wave
start?
bubble,
okay.
each wave bubble.
Got it. Each wave bubble is equivalent to a world, and these worlds, like the waves that give rise to them, are incalculable in number. Of these innumerable worlds, only 7 are inhabited as detailed in the list below. Why is inhabitation limited to only these 7 worlds? Because they are nearest to the Creator, point B in figure 7, as will be explained hereafter. Now, what do we actually find in these 7 worlds? World 1 contains stone, hills and mountains, etc., and nothing else. World 2 contains stone and wind. World 3 contains stone, wind, and metal. World 4 contains stone, wind, metal, and water. World 5 contains stone, wind, metal, water, and vegetation. World 6 contains stone, wind, metal, water, vegetation, and animals. World 7 contains stone, wind, metal, water, vegetation, animals, and human beings.
Can we pause
These-
for a moment? It looks like Elizabeth has a question. Elizabeth?
Well, maybe it can wait. I wanted to know what a big drop is as opposed to a little drop. And if maybe it's a categorization of groupings, like anything up to a certain bar talk or something. I don't know. I was just wondering. It must mean something. I
Yeah,
can
no,
wait.
it's a good question. Bring that up at the end. You know, that is a good question, actually.
Okay, thank you.
These 7 worlds are all said to be in the process of evolution. Now, let us return to point B in figures 6 and 7, representing the Creator. Who, in fact, is this Creator? The story begins again with the same Darya, or ocean, which becomes the Creator when it commences movement and starts to create. And what does it create? It creates, among all the countless other things, let us take this first, the waves, represented as C in figures 6 and 7, which are light globes with innumerable points of lights in each.
Let me jump back to figure 6 just to remind you. So this is B, of course, is the creator point. Now we have waves and bubbles, C. That's what he's talking about here. And he's giving some further explication of it. Yeah, and now he's correlating those waves with light globes. If you remember at the beginning of this lecture, he set up 3 systems of ideational systems, one centering on the ocean, the second centering on light, and the third centering on knowledge. There are 3 ways of talking about the same groups of things. So the ocean would be like the ocean, waves, wave bubbles, drops and drop bubbles. Light would be pure nur itself, which is God, light globes, shadows, and reflections. We're going to get to that. And knowledge will have knowledge, knowing, ignorance, and so forth. I'm just reminding you. So here he's bringing in light globes as another characterization of C, the waves that are in C. Okay, sorry for just jumping in, but linking this with the beginning of the lecture.
These myriad light globes are his, the Creator's, shadows. One will naturally wonder, how can one God have so many shadows? Let us explain this by taking the illustrative case of opposite terms. The infinite has as its opposite term the finite. The light has as its opposite term the shadow. The yes has as its opposite term the no. The one has as its opposite term the innumerable. So if we take the expression one light, combining terms from the series above, we find as the exact opposite the innumerable shadows. Now, as opposites are always the outcome of their originals, it has been proven as a matter of course that the innumerable shadows are the outcome of the one light. That is, one light projects innumerable shadows. Thus, we can see that one God as creator has created such an incalculable vast array of light globes. And these are his innumerable shadows. In turn, each of these innumerable light globes has a shadow of its own, just as each wave has its own wave bubble. And each of these shadows comprises a world, a star or speck, as it appears from a great distance in the sky. When a mere star or world, which is nothing more than a shadow of a shadow, or a light, created by great God, has so much luster and brilliance, even when seen from such a great distance, what a powerful brilliance and luster of light, Nur, the great creator God himself must be.
That Arabic word is a big one in Islam. Nur means light, and it gets used by Baba to refer to the light that is God.
It is indeed a thing beyond imagination and intellect. Then let us proceed. But before we do, let us again confirm that all the innumerable worlds created by God the Creator are indeed and truly just shadows of shadows. That is, shadows of lights within one of God's created waves.
Shall we pause there for a moment?
Yeah.
Is everybody okay? They're with us? And
Can we
Elizabeth has a
reread some of
question.
that?
Can you use the video to reread it?
Yeah, I know it's very, very
Sure.
dense. I'm a little concerned that we won't get through the whole thing. But I mean, you're right. This is so dense. I mean, can you
Well, just
imagine?
if starting back where the opposites, that's where it started to get dense, when it started talking about the opposites.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it elaborated.
Yeah, a quick look at those. That's a really big theme, opposites. In the book, by the way, in the back of the book, there's a section reviewing some of the major philosophical ideas, explaining them. But the infinite and the finite, light and shadow, yes and no, one and innumerable. Now, these infinite light, yes and no are all correlating, are all attributes, aspects of the same thing. So infinite light has as its opposite, or one light has as its opposite innumerable shadows. He said that. He's going to be going over this stuff more. This isn't the last time we're going to see this.
And Ellen Kwiatkowski, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so like this is kind of related to the question I put in the chat. So we're our consciousness, or we're a bubble, and then but as a being, we're comprised of all of creation in a sense. I mean, we're comprised of atom and mineral, bacteria, you name it, and all of that has consciousness assembled around our consciousness or sanskars. So are we like a bubble full of bubbles?
You know, that's that level of implication is something Baba really doesn't get to, but
okay.
I mean, presumably that would be true. I'm sure he's talking about, waves and actually big drops and small drops, as Elizabeth has pointed out. Doubtless, there are countless layers of this, of one thing contained within the other, but he's talking about the major principles here.
Okay. Thank you.
And Diana, you had a question?
Yeah, does the word nur contain with it an idea of reflection as well as of light?
Not that I know of. Of course, I don't read Arabic. It's a huge word in Sufi Islamic discourse. I've never heard that. Someone like
Okay.
Ibn Arabi might bring out such an implication, but I don't know about that.
Okay, thanks.
It's a beautiful word. I love the word nur.
And Christina has her hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment about the progression of the text. If one were to be speaking to a group of philosophers and one was putting forward a panorama containing a new philosophic perspective, one would need to progress in definition of logical dependencies and logical terms and logical rules. And that's exactly what seems to be happening here. It's a progression of definition of how the logic is going to proceed. So you're putting your rules together and you're defining terms, and that's just how it seems to me. So I see this as a form of philosophic logic, and understanding what the term is, how the terms are dependent, and how the rules work. So to me, it's very logical. I don't see this as a form of memorization of wacky information.
Yeah, no, I agree. So some of the things that Baba has presented so far, we can come back to this once we've finished this one and look back, but he presented the ocean wave drop bubble system. He's now correlated that with light. He hasn't fully developed that yet, but he's going to. And he's also introduced the principle of opposites.
Correct.
3 major ideas.
Correct.
Yeah, like in what you're talking about there.
Okay, Jim Wilson, would you mind reading? You have to unmute, of course.
Yes, my computer's been acting up, so if I run into a problem, I might have to bow out. So okay. Now, when out of millions among the masses of humanity, one turns himself around so that now he faces the Creator with his back towards the world, as we explained earlier in Figure 3 on page 102, he sees these innumerable lights in their true natural brilliance, beauty, and splendor, such as he had never seen before as long as his face was towards the world and his back to God. These lights come into his view only after he crosses beyond the stage of the Sheriat and enters into the Tariqat, on which see page 104 to 107. Not only can he now behold these lights in their full brilliance, beauty, and splendor, but he becomes lost in bewilderment as his eyes are more and more attracted and drawn in and fixated on them, as if never to be removed. This fixed gazing enables him to see in these very lights the true form of Paramatma, which is the form of the Sadguru. At this stage, when he thinks of any particular avatar, prophet, or realized master, he can see him, since all these avatars and prophets and realized masters are Sadgurus. Thus, if such an individual thinks of Muhammad, he can actually see the real form, Svarup, of the great prophet of Islam. If his mind turns to Christ, he can see the great Savior of mankind in his true form, and so on. In short, he can see the true form of whomsoever, whichever Sadguru he thinks of in his mind at the time of such seeing. Here Shreve gives the example of his own having seen Hazrat Babajan in the real Paramatma Swarup, first when in his higher state, and then again in the same actual form when he came down here to the earth plane. He continued, when one begins to see this real form of the Sadguru, he sees nothing else but this only, this real Nur, the real luster of the Sadguru's form. And mind you, this is no illusion, no boss, no false form or dream. It is indeed the clear form of the Sadguru. All of this is said to be the first stage. But now remember, these stages, which is to say the planes, have nothing to do with the members of the circle of the realized master or Sadguru. They come to those of a realized master's outer circle, as also to those who are ardent desirers of God, that is, Ravas, or wayfarers.
Yeah, the
This
note
is
this is the
footnote.
note, yeah.
Okay. This is the only occurrence of the word Rarav. Is that how you say it? Rarav?
Yeah. Mhm.
In explanations.
No, it's Rahro. Rahro.
Ravo?
Ra-ra.
Rarov. Okay. Even though Baba did not use the
Aspen.
word in different lectures and infinite intelligence. In the mid-1920s, Meher Baba had not yet begun his work with the musts and God intoxicated, and had not clearly told his disciples about these spiritually advanced souls. Nonetheless, the word Ravuv, when it does appear in the discourses of this period, does seem to denote someone on the planes of consciousness, usually traveling without the guidance of a master. The master exposition on this topic, of course, is William Donkin's The Wayfarers, Meher Baba with the God Intoxicated, written decades later, 1948.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the
Remember
last.
also,
Yeah. Sorry.
okay, this is the
Go ahead.
last little paragraph.
The last
Remember
paragraph.
also that God is everywhere, in the light, in the shadow, everywhere, and that the middle path of the planes is the real path. All other paths lead to states and places nowhere nearer to God than where we already are in the darkness. Wow.
So that's the end of that one.
Wow.
What do you think, Sandra? Should we talk about it or?
I think we should let people make brief comments and questions. And then we may have time to go back and read it over if you want to do that, Ward.
Sure. No, this is very dense and very full of content. I imagine you would.
Yeah, these are all new
that.
concepts for a lot of people with Baba.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Any question? Christina has a comment or question.
Yeah, I feel that it's good for people to share their perspective because it helps others to create a model in their own mind if they're having, confusion about creating a model. Because I do think that it is good to create a model in your head for what's going on. So it seems that this is describing much of what's in infinite intelligence. I've noticed the dependencies between the waves and the bubbles. And I see the wave as movement or the beginning whim and its consequence. and the bubbles as the potential space or the place for imagination to pursue a thinking and an upabog. And yeah, that hollowness is, like Board was saying before, the space of a potential for something to take place, which is the imagination turning into a thinking.
Let me just mention that that's going to be this figure here, which is in tomorrow. The next lecture is totally relevant to this, what you're talking about,
exactly,
where he really does explain what the bubble is and what.
Right, it makes sense. So yeah, I see this as it's all about creating the model for what is the gross world, what is this upabog. And to me, it is, all of this is thinking. All of this is, that's why it's nothingness. It's false thinking. It's like this false movement that is causing movement and limit, and then dependencies based on what happens with movement and limit. So the wave and the bubble, movement and limit. It, to me, it maps with infinite intelligence quite exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet infinite intelligence had not yet been written. Cheryl.
Yes, it itself was latent.
Yeah. Cheryl.
I think, Cassandra, you had suggested we might reread it. I would rather not. People, as you mentioned, people can see this again at their leisure. Could we please, and you were concerned last time about getting through the book. I would vote for continuing to read.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, just kind of spurring off what Christina said, which really I'd never heard that or thought about that. It was really interesting. What that brings to mind is prana and akash, the energy, like the wave moving forward, and akash, the space, or maybe I've got it backwards, but
No,
the
you're
clashing, the limits and the non-limit clashing, the space and the energy moving forward. And I do think there's something to the distinction between big drops and little drops, and big waves and little waves. But it sounds to me, again, reflecting on what Christina said, it's an inherent logic that he's making available to us, which is stratification and categorization of things that are happening in reality or not happening in reality.
Okay, thank you, dear.
Yeah, the big prana and akash lecture is the next one, where he's really going to introduce. It takes about 2 pages, but when he gets here, this is where, in fact, over the next couple lectures is the most important treatment of prana and akash anywhere in Meher Baba's literature. So Baba's coming right into it. He's going to link prana and akash with all of this. Yeah, but it's like he's setting forth the basic vocabulary right now, the basic metaphoric systems, the basic hierarchies. By the way, this one right here, which we read with these worlds, he's going to drop this subject, but it's going to come up in a bunch of lectures later. And he's going to talk a lot about these worlds. Weird, I'll tell you.
You know, Ward, I'm starting to think maybe we should read on because, you know, we're going to accumulate more understanding as we go on.
No, I agree.
So,
no, a bunch of you are bringing up points that are directly relevant to where Baba is going to be going in the next lecture. So maybe that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Is that okay? Yeah.
Can I ask one quick question about this passage before we move on? It's just about the word, the Rawas or Ravas or whatever.
Rao, yeah. You know, the title, The Wayfarers, Duncan's book, it very well could be his or Baba's translation of Rao. That's probably.
Can we see the
English.
spelling?
R-A-H, R-A-H, R-A, I'm sorry,
R-A-H,
R-A-H, R-A-V.
But that V is kind of that Indian consonant halfway between V and W. Yeah, but as Mahu was pointing out, it's actually coming through Urdu from Persian. It's one of
Okay,
these.
I think we should go ahead on then. Is that all right?
And
let's have
maybe the place to start would be taking a look at this diagram, actually, because he's
Oh, yeah,
about to
do that
jump
first.
right into it.
and then we'll have Marion, you can read, Marion Lewis.
So
Yes.
here, okay. By the way, when you don't see a key, just jump to the next page and there it is. So those are the source diagrams that all of this was from. But now Baba is going to talk about 3 ranges of planets, but this is a simplified version. There are going to be 7 ranges of planets. These are just different diagrammatic ways of representing the same thing. As you can see here, actually, the 7 are indicated there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now you're going to get the ocean or Darya, God, or the God in the beyond state, creation point. Now he's going to talk about ranges of planets emanating out of there. And he's going to single out 3 planets in particular, A, B, and C, right? And he's going to explain that over time, A cools down, which is an Earth. This is actually our Earth. And B and C are 2 closely affiliated planets. I'm just giving you a brief explanation of what he's going to go over a lot in upcoming lectures. The Earth cools down and ceases to be habitable. It moves aside, you see here, and becomes A prime. You see A prime there? That's our moon. The moon is a former Earth. And then a planet lower down in this range moves up to the C position, C planet. So this is a wave, right? Or a light globe, reflection of a light globe, actually. C, the former C moves up to the B position, and the former B moves up to the A position. A, B, and C all comprise number 7, which is a single world. Don't try to work this out too much yet, because there's going to be a whole lecture on it. So that's what this is showing. So you see the 7 ranges. The 7th range is A, B, and C. And A, the planet over time moves aside, cools down, becomes a moon, and the other planets shuffle up. That's what this is showing. So he's going to give us a little bit on astronomy now.
And
This is only the beginning. I'll tell you that it gets very, very weird.
yeah, and he's talking to these boys, right? So
Yeah.
maybe a good experiment for all of us is to try to listen with our hearts, as he encouraged them to do, because our minds are going to get all wrapped around the axle.
Mm.
So Marion, do you want to read?
Yes, thank you. We have seen how God unconscious, aroused and stirring into motion, became the creator, designated as B in figure 6 on page 117. Now, likening truth to a vast, unlimited ocean, Darya, we proceed and find that in its very first motion, this ocean created 3 things: the waves, the foam, and the bubbles. That is, the innumerable light globes, light points, and shadows.
If I could just jump in, you see, he's explicitly showing how these 2 metaphoric systems correlate to each other.
Now it should be remembered from last time that these bubbles are of 2 kinds: wave bubbles and drop bubbles. That is, each wave forms its bubble, which may accordingly be termed a wave bubble. And each drop in this wave similarly gives rise to its own drop bubble. Countless drops fill up a wave, and accordingly, a wave encompasses innumerable drop bubbles, in addition to its own wave bubble. The wave C, as illustrated in figure 6, encompasses innumerable lights. That is, the wave is a continuing series of lights, and the light is a part and parcel of the wave. Thus, the wave and the light may be deemed one and the same. Let us now continue by asking the question, how does the Creator create? Turn your attention now to figure 8 on the facing page. Take A in this figure as a darya, or ocean of God unconscious.
So that's the figure we were just looking at, right? This is a creator point, and then we have the ranges of waves or planets coming out of it.
When it arouses into motion, this ocean as creator at point B creates innumerable waves. And for the present, we will restrict our attention to the waves only. Point B, from which the creator functions, is called the Om Bindu, or Om point.
Bindu means point.
So the waves, as they are represented in this figure, divide into 3 ranges: E on the right, D on the left, and C in the middle.
Right? D, C, and E. He probably had a figure drawn on a board, Baba did, and had one of the mandali pointing to these.
Each of these ranges contains countless waves, but out of this boundless multitude, we give our attention only to those nearest to the creator point, or Om Bindu. The nearest waves on the left in D, we designate as 1, 2, and 3. The nearest on the right in E, 4, 5, and 6. While the nearest in the middle range C, we call 7. These 7 are the closest to the creator at point B.
Okay, let's just take a look at what he was just talking about. So you see 1, 2, and 3 in this range D, 4, 5, and 6 in range E, and 7 in range C. And these are all closest to the creator point. And A, B, and C, he hasn't talked about it yet, but he's going to explain how there's a processional. Why don't we read the key to this figure, which was on this previous page? Marian, if you're game for that.
Key to figure 8. This figure depicts the projection of 3 ranges of waves, C, D, and E, out of the ocean of God unconscious, A, through the creator point, or the Om point, B. Closest to the Om point are 7 waves, numbered 1 through 7. The 7th of these, in range C, is comprised of 3 planets, A, B, and C. While the first 6 waves contain forms in evolution, from stone through animal, only the 7th hosts the human form. Planet A is our Earth. on which alone can people gain admission into the spiritual path and realize God. Planets B and C are closely associated with A. The three collectively comprise the seventh wave. The upper panel in Figure 8 depicts this state of affairs. But over the course of time, planet A cools off, ceases to host human life, moves aside, and becomes a moon labeled A
prime.
Oh, A prime. When this happens, the former planet B moves up in the C range to the A slot. The former C becomes B, and another lower planet in the C range advances to become C. This movement and shuffling of positions is shown in the two lower panels. The astronomical subject comes up again in Figure 23, in which the 7 waves of Figure 8 have become the 7 planetary ranges.
Remember the 7 waves we had earlier, going back to that, these seven worlds. The first has stone, then stone and wind, stone, wind, and metal, stone, wind, metal, and water, stone, wind, metal, water, and vegetation, then animals, and then human beings. That correlates with what we're seeing here in these 7 ranges. He hasn't explained that yet, but he's going to. So those are those 7 ranges of worlds that were just described in the earlier one. And these are some of the source diagrams that we were working from. You see, anyway, we can go into, anyone interested can go into that.
Yeah.
Can we pause for a moment? Did you have a question, Elizabeth?
Yes, for Ward, in the diagram you just showed, where the worlds are, can you show that up? So where it says 1, 2, 3, so
Yeah.
he says that the ones closest to the own point, the closest one would be 1, then 2, then 3. So I was just wondering, the 4, 5, 6 seem to be in the correct order, but the 1, 2, 3 seem backwards. Why wouldn't, if the closest one is supposed to be 1, why wouldn't that 1 be where the 3 is and the 3 where the 1 is?
I'm not sure that 1 is the closest, but in any case, in doing this, we just followed our sources.
Okay, thank you.
But we're going to get a lot more on this. He's going to drop this topic, but he's going to come back to it. In fact, let me just quickly show you where some of these things are going to come up again. Yeah, you see this one? That shows the 7 ranges of planets there, right there. And 1 is actually the least developed. This is stone. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you see A, B, and C here. It's the same thing. So what he showed is 3 ranges early on. He's showing us 7 here. He may have been presenting a simplified version of it. She's talking to kids here early on. And then he's going to develop it more later. So we're going to get a lot more on this. Yeah.
All right. So how about Melissa? How about you read for a while? A different voice here. You need to unmute. Yeah. There you go.
Shall I start at all these innumerable?
Yeah.
All these innumerable wave bubbles stand for the so many worlds or stars, call them by any name. Out of these myriad worlds,
Only those 7 closest to the creator point, as described above and indicated in figure 8, are inhabited. One of these 7 worlds features the stone form. That is, it contains nothing but stones of one sort or another, hills and mountains, etc. The second has stone and wind. The third, metal as well. The fourth is inhabited by all of these plus water. In the fifth, vegetative forms have found their place among the others. And in the sixth, along with these lower forms, we find animals too. But in the 7th or last, in addition to the mineral, vegetative, and animal forms, human beings have made their appearance, as we explained in our talk last time. All of these worlds, worlds of all of these types, exist perennially. Let us now examine the 7th world, located immediately beneath the Creator and closest to point B. What we are calling this 7th world is actually composed of 3 worlds. One, A, right below the creator point, and the 2 others, B and C, ranged below planet A in a straight vertical line. These 3, A, B, and C, represent the 3 worlds inhabited by human beings. While God Speaks, page 229, repeats this bit of information that only 3 planets host human life. In many other places, Baba put the number at 18,000. For a detailed discussion, see Appendix 3 on pages 498 to 506.
At some point, I'll quickly show that to you. This goes into a lot of these questions in detail, that appendix.
Immediately beneath the creator point is the world in which we live, this earth, and it is in this world And it is in this world alone that one can realize God because of its extreme proximity to the Creator. In this world, world A in the bracket 7, people are far advanced intellectually, Buddhahiman. But in C, the lowest of the 3 worlds in this bracket, people are the most advanced intellectually, working with their minds alone, although people have bodies in C as they do in A and B. In B, the central world of this bracket, the people are more advanced intellectually than in A, but less than in C.
So A is our planet Earth, of course.
In all 3 worlds, again, people have gross bodies. But the fun of it all is that when one leaves one's body in the lowest of these worlds, C, one advances and gains a place in a higher one, B, and then in due course in the uppermost, A, that is, in our own world, nearest to the Creator, from which vantage point alone can realization be attained. Now, why can one not realize God in either of the 2 lower worlds, B and C? Because only in the uppermost of these 3 worlds, A, are all 3 bodies present, the mental, subtle, and gross. So the bottom note that we passed over was this Gujarati and general Indian word means intelligent or wise. Okay.
But this is the note relating to what we just read, mental, subtle, and gross. And it might be good to read it here.
As explained in Associated Endnote 7, the source text says that there are all mental, subtle, and the gross, but does not specify whether this means the 3 bodies, the 3 spheres, or both. In any event, Meher Baba's metaphysics does not seem to allow that this statement could be literally true. The very existence of the gross sphere and gross body depends on the subtle, and subtle likewise depends upon the mental. Presumably, Baba must mean that only in this planet, A, are the gross, subtle, and mental all accessible to consciousness.
This is in reference to that sentence, because only in the uppermost of these three worlds are all three bodies present, mental, subtle, and gross. Well, there must be mental, subtle, and gross bodies present in planets B and C too. It has to be there. I mean, Baba's metaphysics. So I think he's referring to whether you can become conscious of it or not.
At this juncture, in the course of general conversation, passing reference was made to the fact that all of this was being explained by that very same one, the Creator himself, who is no one other than the Sadguru, who created all these worlds in the first place. Hereupon, Shri proceeded to the next stage of his explanation with reference to another diagram as follows. Now mark what happens next. According to the theory of involution and evolution, after ages, the uppermost world, A, cools down and becomes like a shadow. Originally, as we saw, it was a light, a state. It shifts from its former place and moves aside as depicted in figure 8. And as soon as this happens, the two worlds beneath it, B and C, rise up and occupy their new respective positions, each of them one step higher. That is, B takes the position formerly held by A, and C, the former position of B. Bear in mind as we continue that the wave from which these worlds originated was created through motion, that the wave gave rise to a wave bubble, that the wave contains countless drops, and that these in turn precipitated in their own drop bubbles. And so on and on it goes. We are taking our own world, the one nearest to the creator point, as our example and illustration. In this world of ours, evolution started up and transpired from its very earliest stages and gradually passed and progressed through all the myriad diverse forms from stone to human. But eventually, through the course of evolution, the world begins to cool down until at last it moves aside, as we have been explaining. Within the first 6 of the 7 worlds discussed in our last talk, see page 120, evolution happens within the limits that these worlds lay down. In the first world, for example, which is the world of stone, we find no progress or evolution, but only the stone form again and again. In the second world, evolution transpires only within the strict limits of the stone and wind forms. In the third world, these limits extend to stone, wind, and metal forms. And in the fourth, to all these forms plus water, and so forth. In short, in all these worlds, evolution takes place within the number and assortment of forms one finds in each. But in the 7th world only, our own world, evolution crosses the entire range and processional from stone to human beings. But now we come to another question. How is evolution itself created?
Now we're going to arrive here at another huge topic. So maybe this might be a good moment to look back Also, I don't want to inundate people with too much. Is this enough for a night, or how are you feeling?
Yeah, I think your instincts are right, Ward. That's enough for this session.
Now we're really going to get Pran and Akash. That's the next topic, which he's going to introduce, which is a huge topic. And he's going to leave this astronomy business for a while.
So any questions, go ahead and raise your hands. We can go back on something. If you want to look at a
By the way, let me just take the moment to show you. It's a little hard for me to move here, but there's going to be a lot on astronomy, and in the back of the book, there is, okay. Sorry, it's a bit cumbrous, my scrolling through. Okay. We haven't gotten to evolution yet, but there are going to be a lot of questions relating to evolution that are going to come up. So this reviews a lot of the issues. It actually correlates God Speaks and a lot of the major sources that are available. There hasn't been a treatment like this before, sort of bringing all these things together. But here's the one on astronomy. And one thing it talks about is this processional of planets. We've seen a little bit of this already, with C moving up to B and B to A and A moving aside to become a moon. And also this question whether there are 3 worlds, 3 worlds or 18,000 with human life in it. There's no doubt about it that there is a stark contradiction in statements we have here. So this reviews a lot of the evidence that we have running up through the 1960s. And to my mind, 18,000 is the correct number. But this reviews what, and also this, when he gets back to this later, we're going to get a very strange discussion about planets A, B, and C, all emanating from one single light globe, which winds up producing 7 suns. So that's going to come up later. So we're going to have a lot more on this later on in the series. Okay.
You want to take some questions? Mahu. Why do I always say it wrong?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Jay Baba.
You don't want to know my real name. Actually, I don't have question. I have suggestion. And the suggestion is a word. I think it would be good because we have roughly about 45 minutes left toward the end of the session. And of course, there may be a few questions, but in this part, it looks like, and that's my only take, the suggestion, that Baba is establishing some foundation with vocabularies and metaphors, as you said. So it may be a good idea that we continue to read a little bit more, and then we can always come back and reread it next time. This will give us some mental note. And I feel Baba really creates a curiosity here by each title, the way that you have put it together. So I like to see that we read a little bit more, and the opportunity is there to watch the video on and on if anybody is really interested to just follow, reread it and so forth. But I like, to suggest that we read at least a 2 to 3 page more about evolution. Jay Bob.
Well, I think we have a lot of questions right now, and people have been waiting kind of patiently to get to do that. So it's up to you, Ward. You make the call.
I mean, after questions, if time.
Yeah, let's do the questions.
Oh, after questions? Yeah, let's take the
I'm a
question.
little reluctant to try to go on tonight because
Mm.
we would just broach a huge topic, which Bob is going to talk about for several lectures. We can, if you
Okay.
guys want to. Let's see what after these questions and discussions, but there's been a lot
Yeah.
of stuff we've already had.
And I think Ward has the best feel for this because he's read it. How many times did you say 2 million?
Oh, yeah, I know.
2 million, 3
I mean, I've been
million?
working on it since 1997, so I just work on
Yeah.
it day after day. But you know, it's funny now that I'm working, whenever a group of people comes into it, the experience really changes. I see it with
Awesome.
new eyes. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see. Jim Wilson. He's frozen. So let's go to Elizabeth.
Yeah, I have a comment and a quick question. The quick question is about the 18,000. Somehow I missed what that was about. And the comment was, what I'm getting from this is, I'm feeling that these are the laws of nature that were established, that God established, that we're seeing the construction of these laws that that are never broken except by God himself when he has the whim. So it's really interesting to me to see what the structure is and what has to be broken for the whim to be initiated. Like, you know, before the whim is the urge. And so relating that to what's coming after with the wave and the drops and all of that. And essentially, when a whim happens, something new in creation ends up coming out that wasn't expected, that even God didn't expect it, and that he's still becoming conscious. Any comments on the whim versus the structure? I mean, I don't know. Is this kind of in the right direction?
Yeah, the idea of the whim, of course, Baba hadn't expressed yet, although we have to presume that it's operative. But I would think that the whim would give rise to this whole structure as the means and channels of the development and expression of its search for itself. Thus, all these, you know, different ranges of planets and this patterning of opposites and all of that.
But do you think these are the quote laws of natures that Baba refers to in many, many books? You know, the karmic laws. He can't break the laws. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I wonder, would like these opposites, the infinite and finite, these are kind of like the framing, the crucible, the framing terms out of which creation arises itself. I guess you could call that laws of nature. It's the source of the laws of nature. These 7 ranges of planets are the fundamental design, planetary design, I guess. Yeah, would you call those laws of nature? Maybe.
I think they're universal laws in a way.
I think they're universal. I mean, he's talking about how the whole universe works. By the way, I haven't gotten into it. Maybe at some point it would be worth in our discussion to have a 5 or 10 minute review of infinite intelligence on thinking the imagination, because it's going to turn out to be very relevant here. Although Baba never explained it again. He only explained it in infinite intelligence, and he hadn't explained it to the boys. But I'll just flip this out there as a wild card, where he talks, you see these 7 worlds that this is showing, right? You can see all this. These are the 7 ranges of planets that are closest to the Om point. And he says that these are the 7 inhabited worlds, or whatever. I think worlds is maybe the term he uses. So the thing I've wondered is, if the first has stone, it's not inhabited by human beings, right? What is it inhabited by? Well, here's my wild and crazy speculation. What he means is it's inhabited in the sense that the imagination has been realized, and the other worlds are completely unrealized worlds of the imagination that no one has ever identified with. Okay, it would take a long time to unpack all of that, but that's my current theory.
Well, we have a lot to look forward to in our sessions with you. Okay, I don't think we got Jim back. Farish Day. Farish Day, dear.
Hi, yes.
Yeah.
Cheryl was ahead of me, but I'm willing to give up my space, or I'll go quickly.
Well, you called on by special request.
Oh.
You
So,
go on, Crush Day. You go on and take your time.
I just want to comment on two things. One was the 18,000 planets that Baba said had human life in it. And I'm wondering in my head, asking the question, if there's only one Om point, maybe Baba is talking about multitudes of C-type worlds that come to be. Not just, for illustration purposes, maybe he just used the 3 dots, 3 worlds, but there are maybe multitudes of C-type worlds that the sum total then being 18,000 planets. But if there were multiple Om points in multiple universes, maybe Baba was talking about the sum total of human life in all universes. I don't know. Only Baba knows. Maybe you have some thoughts on that. The second one was the word Rahro, and Mahu will agree, is a Persian word. Rah means the path or the way, and Ro is to go, to traverse. So Rahro is the ones who are traversing the path, literally. So that's what I love about Baba. He picks words that are very self-descriptive in the original language, but you can't do that in English, sadly. So that's my 2 cents.
When you get the book, some of you, I really would recommend you read that appendix where this question of 18,000 really is gone into. Baba hadn't said 18,000 at this early date. So he seems to indicate that there are just 3 planets with human life, although there are little details that don't fully coordinate with that. Also, there's in God Speaks in the supplement a footnote which says there are only 3 planets with human life. However, there are many statements where Baba in the 50s and 60s where Baba explicitly says 18,000 with human life. So the evidence is reviewed in that appendix. Again, I think it's 18,000, and he's taking 3 as the 3 that are interconnected with our Earth. That seems to be part of this story, and is kind of representative or archetypal. I always remember when Baba was, saying things like this. Remember at this time he was talking in the West tank room. He hadn't shifted to the crypt cabin yet. The West tank room is right now the museum. The museum up on the top of Marabut Hill. So it's nighttime. They probably have lanterns. You've got 100 kids packed into that room. You've got Mandali interpreters. So remember the circumstances under which he's giving all this stuff. So I think some of these points are explicable, that Baba was presenting this for the first time. He hadn't given this to the Mandali that I know of, and is giving first in a rather simplified form, and then he returns to these points and develops it more later. So keep in mind the context in which all of this stuff is given out.
And if I could just make a quick comment, I'm interested in how the emotional voice that Baba uses in these writings, he uses expressions like, isn't it wonderful? you know, or wasn't that exciting? It's just like his childlike response to what he's talking about. Cheryl, your turn, dear.
I'm still laughing at what you just said. Yeah, it's true. Bob is delighted with his own creation. Obviously. So I have to like stop laughing because that was great. So one, I was going to ask if, and maybe Ward, you can't do it right at this moment, but if you had a review in your own mind of the, and I loved what you just said about the 3 and the 18,000. That made sense to me that they're closest to our, I guess it is Earth. But anything else you could just, I know it seems like pages and pages in the appendix for that difference of 3 and 18,000. But if you could say anything more about that. And also I'm thinking, because we're always slated to be 2 hours. I agree, I'm not sure at this point, but with Mahu about reading some more, since you know, we spend a lot of time, we don't start till 10 minutes after 11 or later, and we seem to be quitting at 10 minutes after 12 in terms of reading each time. And so we're really only reading for an hour, which I'd like to point out. So just to think about that for the next sessions, because we're not really spending much time reading. And I love the questions. I'm not saying to take away question time. I'm just saying to stop early, which we've been doing, is making me a little like, since I set aside, I'm sure a lot of other people set aside time to sit here and be with this, and then we're stop early. It's, for me, it doesn't sit well. So Ward, do you have anything more you can say about the 3 and the 18,000 that you remember from your own memory?
You know, I think it'd probably be best to let people read the appendix, because the 18,000 is not something that Baba brings up here. But just be aware that there is a contradiction. He does explicitly say in the Note in God Speaks that there, by the way, I think that Note in God Speaks, I wrote this in that appendix. I think it very likely was written by Ramju. And he might have been using his previous knowledge from this. Ramju was involved in God Speaks to a certain extent. And if he had put something like that in, Erich and everybody else would have deferred to him, because Ramju was here back in these early days.
And I do have one more question about the text here. I'm trying to correlate, I'm taking notes. The waves are compared with light globes. Yeah. Could you say again, what is the foam compared with and the bubbles? I wasn't writing fast enough. I was thinking about something.
Well, Baba says about foam that he's going to explain it later, and he never does.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm counting on some of you to crack this nut, solve it.
And then if waves are related to light globes, the bubbles are related to what?
They don't exactly, well, okay, a wave bubble would be like a shadow of a light globe, which would be a world. He doesn't exactly have a light metaphor correlating to drop bubble or a jivatma. He does, I suppose it would be a ray or something like that, or the shadow of a ray, but he doesn't bring that up. He doesn't extend the analogy that far. But you see how he's correlating these systems of analogies, right? With light, although it's not just analogies, it's literally true. You have actual worlds, actual planets, you know. But he characterizes the planet as a wave bubble and as the shadow of a light globe. Shadows, light globes.
Okay.
He hasn't brought knowledge, but remember the 3 systems he said at the beginning: light, ocean, and knowledge. He hasn't been talking much about knowledge, but he's going to get to that in lectures upcoming. By the way, some of you have said you want to read on. I'm perfectly willing to read on if that's the consensus of the group. I can certainly do it. I just don't want people to get in, you know, be inundated with too much, if that's how you're feeling.
Well, I kind of feel like it's not fair to not allow people to ask their questions at this point.
Yeah, let's be
So
sure to get
why
the
don't we
all the
go ahead
questions.
with the questions and we'll see where we get to. Diana.
Yes, Ward, as I remember in earlier sessions, you mentioned that Baba ended each of these presentations with telling the boys to create prem. And in the previous day's lecture, I didn't see that, but I saw something else that I found rather interesting. Could we look at that page?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do it every single time, but he does it
Okay.
often. Yeah.
Because he's mentioning when the wayfarer, you know, begins on the path, yeah, right there. He can see, he can actually see
Right.
the Sadguru's form, and it's not an illusion.
Right.
He actually sees the clear form of the Sadguru, and I can't imagine that happening without that pilgrim being so completely lost in love for
Yeah.
God
Mm-hmm.
that the theme already seems to be there. Not a theme that comes through the lectures, but you know, this idea that Baba wants them to love God.
Yeah, no, he certainly is talking about somebody who's spiritually advanced with these Rauravs. Yeah. Now, this is actually something I'm glad that there's a moment to talk about. This passage, this very page, the page that he brought us to, where he's talking about light globes. He says that, in fact, there are several versions of this very same lecture that got published in the Mayor Message and Ramju Abdullah's Philosophy and Teachings. I haven't really gone into that there, but in the supplement, you'll see a lot of this. But they say this too, that these light globes become visible when you enter the spiritual path. We had earlier the Shariat, the Tariqat, right, where Baba explained what that meant. So what I take that to mean is that these light globes are not of the gross sphere, but are of the subtle or one of the higher spheres. And we're going to get some of this strange stuff later that could not be true in the gross universe. So I think these light globes actually belong to the higher spheres. And this passage seems to imply that. When you enter, in fact, in one of the rewrites of this, in the Mayor Message, Baba says, all these great scientists with their big, expensive telescopes. By the way, the Hubble telescope was very much in operation at this time in California, Los Angeles. But he said, they can't see a light globe, but a simple pilgrim on the path can see them. Well, that seems to me to be saying light globes belong to the inner worlds, not the gross world. That's the only place here where he seems to make that point. A lot of stuff Baba is really not explaining to these kids. And I think about things like this, that this belongs to the subtle sphere, this belongs to the mental sphere, this belongs to the gross. And I think part of the reason for that is that he was taking these kids to the point where they could practically see this stuff, you know? Like when he's talking about these planets, you might say it's very abstract, but I think he was showing it. I mean, it was nighttime, remember, and all the stars are out there visible outside. I think he was taking them right to the very curtain where they could practically see it themselves.
All right, Christina, go for it.
Thank you. I have a comment about the phone, Ward. But before I say that, this is the false imagination, the false thinking rather, the imagination into the nothing, all of this. So the subject and object structure is false. That's just part of the given. That's part of the basic on this. And the drop bubbles are the realizers at every level. So that's why they're able to create more drop bubbles. And if we look at the chronology of the planet's contents, which is imagination, thinking rather, say from stone to metal, the difference between stone and metal is one of organization and one of collectiveness. Stone has no collectiveness. It is whatever it is. Metal differs from stone in that metal is a collective of one thing that's similar. So you would have this metal and you would have that metal. So you would start to have separation in collectiveness. And then after that, you would have vegetation. So stone, wind is the movement. And then that causes the opportunity for collectiveness. And then you have another form of, I don't know, to say movement is something else, but you have another like vehicle, and then you have another form of collectiveness, vegetation. I don't know, it just seems to me that there's this concept of the advance of collectiveness. And it goes along with an advance of thinking, imagination, and self-reflection. Metal knows itself to be metal. I mean, it is, it creates itself to be of itself. And that goes along to me with those three, what were they again? Knowing was knowledge, or knowing was the third one.
Knowledge, okay, light, the ocean, light,
Light,
and knowledge.
ocean, and light,
Yeah.
ocean, and knowledge to me corresponds with thinking, imagination, and self-reflection. To be able to, and that, like, that's why it's not a straight line. It is like a loop. What would you call it? Like a you know, like on the chart, the
Spiral.
advancing straight, a spiral. Yeah, that's why it's a spiral. It kind of almost loops upon itself again. It goes back and becomes reflective, self-reflective, and then it moves on and becomes self-reflective in each of these stages. And they are major breaks of the stages. So to my mind, the phone is a form of collectiveness, and there's layers of phone, and it is this self-reflectiveness that is shared, because each of those planetary yeah, I guess you call it planetary options. What was it? 1 through 6, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7. They're just like trajectories of the imagination. They're just trajectories that, you know, didn't quite pan out maybe. And but they have to exist because, you know, just like in genetics, you have to have every option or have every option. So that's my thought about that.
Well, thank you.
Are these, you're still seeing on the screen the 7 worlds, right? Is that visible to you
Yes.
all? Yeah. Let me just show you this. But by the way, those 7 worlds, they don't correspond to Baba's 7 kingdoms of evolution as you find it later. In fact, you find it later
Correct.
in this book. It's kind of interesting, which would be stone, metal,
Worm.
vegetation, worm, fish, bird, animal. But these, you know, just go straight, you know, but it includes stone, and wind, and metal. Metal is a kingdom, but then, and water. But take a look at this. This is a topic that you get here, the 4 elements. Baba didn't bring up the 4 elements later, but he did here, and he did when he dictated that film in New York, film scenario, how it all happened, that the 4 elements. So the, you know, earth, water, air, and fire are apparently a part of that picture. So I do notice that stone and wind, okay, that's bringing in air, and stone, wind, metal, and water That's bringing in the element of water. Both stone and metal belong to the domain of Earth. Those planets don't get to the fire element. So there's another conceptual system that Baba is bringing into the picture. He hasn't mentioned it yet, but he's going to.
Yeah, I kind of like the notion of precipitates that Ellen brought up before. There's like kind of a sense of precipitation with the wind and the water.
Yeah.
So anyway, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Ward, I wanted to go back to those three analogies that are related to each other. You have a special name for that that you've mentioned in God Speaks. But so you said and this is also in response to what Cheryl was asking about. One was ocean waves drops, and in the wave or Nur, it was Nur light glows and shadow. And then knowledge, I know knowing was one, and
Knowledge,
there were two others.
knowing, and then there's ignorance. These don't exactly perfectly match to each other, but they broadly speaking do. We haven't, this is the page where those three, I drew attention to it when it came up, because as you can see, Bob is starting to unpack these. To glean some faint idea of this mighty existence through the intellect, let us at least understand as far as possible the infinite creator's equally infinite creation. In the endeavor to do this, let us compare what is really and truly the incomparable with ocean, light, and knowledge, since these serve as the most suitable similes under the circumstances. That's where he set up those three ideational systems. And you can see how he's been developing two of them, ocean and light, right? He hasn't really come to knowledge yet. He's going to get there.
Okay, thank
you. You're muted.
So, I have one comment.
Because I muted her. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I have one comment based on the figure you just showed. So, in thinking about wind and water and the planets, so the fire and the air both have the wind element. So they actually cover all the elements. So I guess stone and metal are part of earth, and water is water. I don't know if there's another one, but it seems that wind is actively, well, maybe wind's also involved with water because it helps create the wave. I don't know. But definitely wind is involved with the air, and fire cannot exist without a movement of air to flame it up, to inflame it.
Yeah, we're going to get, the four elements later on. He just brings them up a little bit, but it's very significant. It would be good sometime to have a little thing on thinking the imagination, because Baba does indicate, in fact, I'll show you the diagram. We put it in this diagram here. This is the clashing of Pran and Akash, which is what we're coming to. So you see Pran and Akash, and they clash in a flash of lightning. And out of these, the first thing that comes is the four elements. Before any, embodiment, by the way, the first embodiment in the 10 States of God chapter is the fourth state of God. God is the embodied soul. But it appears that before that, you get the four elements. And I take those as belonging to the domain of the imagination. Again, we should have about 10 or 15 minutes on infinite intelligence at some point where he really explains what the imagination is.
Yeah, we can do that at the start of the next session. I don't see any reason why we're not. If you want to do that, the first 15 minutes will be on thinking the imagination.
Okay, that
right.
I think it would be a good point, because not everyone has read Infinite Intelligence, and even those who have read it might not remember it perfectly.
Okay,
it's a difficult
yeah,
book.
for sure. Well, I think that's the end of the questions. Did anybody else have another question about what we covered today? Why don't you go ahead and stop the share, Ward?
Okay.
And, oh, Jim has a question.
Hmm.
Finally got back, Jim. Huh?
Well, I just have a simplistic remark to make. A couple of weeks ago, I read in the New York Times science section that there's a group of scientists explained that they feel that about close to 40% of the Earth's resources are now used up. And of course, it sounds a lot like Mahesh is pretty busy at annihilating the planet. And so that succession of the planets that we saw, where the Earth ends up as the moon. And is there anything more desolate than the moon? And Baba is showing us that even as the Earth is going through this destruction process, that a new one is already on the way. Kind of idea that something's going to take its place. So when we think of the millions of lifetimes that we have to live, this extends time and circumstances beyond all limits of the Earth itself. So it's,
Yeah.
I find it kind of an interesting thing. Science.
I'm
might be
sure we've
interested.
all been through lots of planets. I don't know how far back they trace humanity, what, 200,000 years ago, or, there are, various other, species, but the human beings originated several 100,000 years ago. Well, whatever the precise number may be, we've got 8,400,000 lifetimes. You can't do it in that length of time. So we go through lots of planets. If you look at your trash can, right, all the trash you do, well, just think of how many planets we've trashed.
Yeah.
Being a little facetious here, but
Well,
no,
well,
but
I think we're all. I think we're all ready to get into a little bit of silliness. So before I stop the recording, can we say the Beloved's Prayer together?
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
We'll continue. Beloved God,
God,
reach on you
help us all to love you more,
Love you more and
and
more.
more,
and
and
more,
more and more, and still yet more,
till
till
we
we become worthy of union.
With you.
help us all
And
to
Help us all hold fast Baba's Dhamma
Baba's Dhamma
till the very end.
Avatar,
Meher
Baba
Baba Ki Jai.
Excellent.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording and then you guys can chat.
Cheryl, I have a question. So the 4 elements that were created, I've always thought of 5, but it's